Hi, I'm Dr. Connie Zweig, and I'm going to give a free webinar today, Opening the Portal to the Creative Unconscious, exploring shadow work and creativity. So if you have any creative project that you're working on in any medium, and you're feeling stuck, a writer's block, a painting block, any kind of imaginary obstacle that you're experiencing, procrastination, or can't get started, or can't complete, we can apply the tools of shadow work to creativity. And today I'm going to walk you through step by step to be able to do that. So I'm going to start by sharing my screen with the PowerPoint. And my intention with you is to begin a process in which you can approach the shadow or the imaginal realm, or what I call the creative unconscious, a bit differently and explore it differently with less fear and reluctance and more curiosity and openness. And so you're going to leave here with two tools: shadow work, which needs to be a continuing practice, and a visualization to meet the muse, which you can use at any time. So let's open with this question. What is the boundary between the familiar, known world of ego and the unfamiliar, unknown, even incomprehensible world of the unconscious? What holds that boundary in place? What makes it porous, even to transport, even for a moment? Those of us who are students of Carl Jung know that he spent a lifetime using dreams and active imagination to cross this boundary, to move from the known to the unknown world and back again, like an intrepid explorer leaving us traces of his footprints. And we've read the mythic tales of guides to the underworld: Hermes, Ariadne, Virgil, and more. And we know artists use images to bring the hidden world into view. And others deconstruct images in an attempt to glimpse what lies behind or beneath them. Writers use story to constellate an obscure reality. Poets use metaphor, musicians use melody, filmmakers use mythic story structure. And all of them have the power to open us to a larger reality, an archetypal source. As these bridges appear connecting the inner world and the outer world, we can become more familiar with traveling on them and begin to live a creative life. A life that's both receptive to the promptings from within and responsive to them. A life that's attentive to the psyche and co-creating with it. And this collaboration between the conscious mind and the personal unconscious, or shadow, is required to live a creative life. But when we enter this inner realm again and again, we may find ourselves living on the other side of the boundary for a moment, outside of conventional society, connecting to something mysterious, something larger than ourselves, something that most other people on this side of the boundary know nothing about. Jung left us footprints in the recently translated Red Book and Black Books. And we see there that to approach the threshold of the imagination or the creative unconscious is a revolutionary act. We live in an extroverted thinking culture. And for many extroverts, the turn within, the turn from rationality to imagination, can feel dangerous. Think about all those artists who went insane, we're told. All the people who call that time being self-absorbed. The critics who shame those who never made a commercial success. The others who say he just daydreams. She's lost in her music, pathologizing the natural introversion of many. The sea of internal archetypes, images, memories, intuitions, and values that inform our creativity is what Jung called the psyche, the personal unconscious, embedded in the larger collective unconscious. To cross the threshold, to enter this mysterious world, is to enter everything, the vast expanse of prima materia from which everything arises. So what do we risk by approaching the forbidden world? Or conversely, what do we risk by avoiding it, even denying its existence? What is the shadow? Many of you listening will have some ideas about this. You'll know that it was a term coined by psychiatrist Carl Jung at the turn of the century, referring to the personal unconscious. And you may know how it develops in us when we're kids, as we identify with socially acceptable traits to find love and acceptance from adults, and we form a conscious ego. And at the same time, we banish socially unacceptable traits into the unconscious shadow. And so the ego and the shadow develop in tandem. If our sadness is shamed, it's exiled into the shadow. Little boys don't cry. If our anger is punished, it's banished too. Little girls don't throw tantrums. If our music or artistic talent is dismissed, it gets buried in the shadow. That's a waste of time. You have to earn a living. And because the shadow is beneath our threshold of awareness, we can't gaze at it. It's like a blind spot in our field of vision. And so we need to learn how to seek it, how to see in the dark. And although these unacceptable feelings and images and traits lie dormant, they often erupt abruptly in hurtful or self-destructive behavior, like lying, cheating, addiction, projection. And we see the shadows of politicians a lot these days. So with shadow work, we learn how to listen to the inner voices of shadow characters that lead us to do the same things we've always done without the results we want. And as we learn to detect these voices as shadow characters and work with them, they shift. They begin to lose their grip on us, and we can begin to make more conscious choices. The shadow is like a dark room in which our feelings and dreams and images lie dormant. And shadow work is like the process of development in which they come back to life. As most of you know, I've written 4 books on the shadow. As a therapist for 30 years, I guided people to look more deeply into their interior worlds with shadow work. What led me to follow Jung's footsteps into this territory? In my first analysis, I realized that by staying with my ego mind's conscious awareness, I was living in a narrow bandwidth, enjoying intellectual pursuits, but avoiding anything beneath conscious awareness, continuing unknowingly to banish unwanted thoughts and feelings into the shadow. And yet I observed from time to time that they erupted into my awareness and sabotaged my behavior, sometimes leaving me feeling embarrassed or regretful. As I explored my dreams, I began to see that the unconscious holds not only those thoughts and feelings and images that are deemed dark by the ego, it also holds our rejected talents and gifts and dreams. The creative unconscious, as I'm calling it here, is our source of imagination, inspiration, and creativity. And as those talents and dreams get stuffed away, they create the unlived life. That could be athletic gifts. They could be artistic gifts. They could be feelings, all of which are deemed inappropriate or unacceptable by a family. And so if our talents and gifts are not valued, they get stuffed into the shadow. And the result is that our spontaneous creativity can't pierce the boundary and arise naturally from the psyche. Instead, those inspirations and hunches and images sink back into the unconscious. In the inner work of age, I explored shadow work into later life. Let me say something about creativity and aging. The link between the creative imagination and aging is complex. It urges us to ask, what is possible in late life? Not what is impossible due to limits, not what is possible despite aging, but what is possible because of it? What can we create because of our extended life experience, our resilience, our long view, our personal histories of wrestling with shadows? Stories of late life creative renaissance abound, and I was stunned when I began reading about how many artists created their masterworks in every medium later in life. So according to creativity research, there's a universal pattern to the process that we could call the archetype of creativity. Step one is preparation, a time when basic information or skills are assembled. We may be gathering facts or resources or supplies. Whether in science or music or the arts, we need to prepare by reading, contemplation, conversation, research, creating set and setting. Step two is incubation, a relaxed time during which we don't work consciously to solve a problem, but connections are unconsciously being made. Paul McCartney reported that he found the melody to the beautiful song Yesterday in a dream. For many of us, dreams work in an unconscious process in which dots are being connected and archetypal narratives become visible. A story, a melody, a hypothesis gestating in the psyche. Einstein called this confirmatory play. He said that his best scientific insights arose on his breaks from violin practice, which suggests that immersion in nonverbal, non-logical brain regions is helpful before logical concepts emerge. Robert Louis Stevenson said little helpers from his unconscious wrote The Strange Case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde while he slept. In science, the renowned physicist Niels Bohr dreamt of a planetary system that led him to the model of the atomic structure. So you can see that the ego is not in charge. The shadow, the creative unconscious, is integrating vast amounts of information and digesting it into patterns, a work of art, or a breakthrough insight. Step 3, inspiration, the eureka moment, when a person in a creative impasse suddenly sees the solution. And it happens quickly with the experience of a positive feeling, and it's convincing to the experiencer. When I was working on my novel about the life of Rumi, which is called A Moth to the Flame, following a long incubation period in which I was steeped in Rumi's poetry, there was a moment of sudden perception of his story arc, his behavior shifts, and his spiritual shifts into a life that had been forbidden to him, a life of poetry and dance and ecstasy. And I recognized his story as my own, and that's how I knew I could write it. In the world of science, there are many stories about this, like Newton discovering the principle of gravitation by observing an apple fall from a tree. Step 4 is production. When insights are put into useful form, a book is completed, a scientific solution, a sculpture, painting, musical composition takes form. Sorry about that. I'm reminded of the coronavirus vaccine when scientists researched mRNA for years, preparing for a need, and the research incubated in their minds, and then many discovered how to make it at the same time, and the vast apparatus of governments around the world figured out how to deliver it. So the creative process is essentially the same in scientific, artistic, musical, written innovation. There's an archetype of creativity. So let's pause here and explore your experience. If you're doing this, if you're watching this webinar while you're doing a creative project of any kind, choose one project to apply to what you learn here. Choose a process or a response or a product that you've experienced creating. And I hope it's fairly recent so that you can recall the inner process as well as the outer process. And again, it can be in any field. And it can be solo or collaboration. So for preparation, take a few minutes and note down your process of preparation. And try to stay just with that. I'm going to move through this quickly, but you can stop the slides, you can stop the presentation and take your time, take all the time you need. So what is your experience of preparing? And what is your experience of incubation? And what is your eureka moment? And what is your experience of bringing it into form? So you may see that there's something missing in this classic model of creativity. What has stopped you from step 1, starting a creative project? Did you attribute this to an external circumstance or an internal block? Did you pause and self-reflect about this tension between your conscious desire and this unconscious force that's stopping you? So the standard model doesn't include unconscious process. During incubation, during preparation or some of these other steps. It does include it during incubation, when experts admit that the mind is asleep or wandering in a non-rational way. And during the eureka moment, when a solution is not the result of logic or strategy. But the model doesn't include the shadow to explore how it interrupts this process at any moment in any of these stages. How the shadow can slow us, detour us, sabotage us in our creative endeavor. So we're going to add this dimension to the archetype of creativity. Some part of us doesn't want to begin the creative project. Another part of us doesn't want to complete it. Some part of us feels anxious or ashamed about even dreaming of a creative accomplishment. And another part feels rushed and pushed from within. Some part of us wants fame and fortune, and another wants to hide. Maybe you're familiar with these conflicting feelings in the arena of love or work, but maybe they feel vague and abstract. With shadow work, we can learn to personify these abstract feelings, turning them into very specific figures by identifying their voices and feelings and sensations. It turns out that each shadow character has 3 dimensions that always repeat. They're always identical when that shadow part erupts. As we begin to become aware of this, we can give it an image, a face, a body, a symbol, and give it a name. The boss, the critic, the bad daughter, the procrastinator, the perfectionist, not good enough, saboteur, avoider. And in this way, we can learn to recognize them as they arrive, so that a vague, barely conscious part of us that's fleeting and intangible emerges to become a familiar, identifiable figure in our conscious awareness. That's the promise of creative shadow work. And we can choose time and again whether to obey it or not during our creative project. So we're going to look at each stage in relation to the shadow. Step 1, preparation. Taking action to gather the skills that you need and readying your state of mind to approach the threshold. An unconscious figure can sabotage your intentions right here off the bat. Many people feel resistance or reluctance at the start of a project. Their inner dialogue may be, I can't do this. I don't have the ability. I don't have the time. I don't have the support. I can't afford it. Have you ever heard this voice in your mind? This is a voice of a shadow character blocking your conscious intention. When you start to imagine the project, your shadow says no. It's as if you're moving in one direction and this perpendicular roadblock appears. How did you respond? If you obey the shadow voice, preparation stops. This unconscious part of you has a different agenda, and it sabotages the forward movement. For many people, this creative saboteur is an inner critic that may stem from a negative parental message, a teacher's message, or another source. You're too big for your britches. Who do you think you are? Art is a waste of time. Music is a waste of time. You're not smart enough or talented enough. So if this is your guardian at the gate, if this is the saboteur stopping you from crossing the threshold, make some notes now about preparation and the shadow. After detecting your repeating thoughts, as you begin a project, what are the feelings that arise? Unease, panic, dread, hesitation, uncertainty, insecurity. And what bodily sensations go along with these thoughts and feelings as you begin preparation? Are your shoulders tight? Is your belly tight? Is your chest heavy? Is your throat closed? Now imagine these thoughts and feelings and sensations as an inner figure with an inner voice and feelings and sensations. As you personify it, who is it? Give it an image. What does it look like? And give it a name. And jot it down. Who is stopping you at this stage of the process? Try to catch that whispering, repeating voice. Try to catch the repeating feelings and sensations. What's the image? Is it a critic shaking a finger at you? Is it a procrastinator trying to stop you? So you're meeting a shadow figure in the preparation stage. And when you listen to it, what are the consequences? How do you feel about yourself as you begin the project? Can you romance this shadow character? That is, bring it into awareness by personifying it and begin again by not obeying it. So let's go to step 2, incubation and the shadow. For most people, the ego is in charge and it has no connection to unconscious process. If they have no practice of mental relaxation, letting go of focus, they can't get through this stage with mere intention or will. So have you heard this inner dialogue? I don't daydream, it's a waste of time. I'll figure it out if I just try hard enough. Concentrate. Dreams aren't reality, they don't have a message for me. These folks may have an unintentional breakthrough, but they're not collaborating with the creative process. So notice that inner dialogue. Notice the feelings that go with it. Maybe you're restless or anxious. Maybe you're distracted or bored. And notice the sensations. You can't settle down. And give a name and an image to this shadow. You could call it the scientist or the skeptic or the denier. And step 3 is inspiration. Imagine how many millions of people have had a clear insight or eureka moment that could have changed the world, but denied it or shut it down. Perhaps they heard a shadow figure dismiss it, saying, that doesn't matter. It won't make any difference. The problem is too big. No one will care. So inspiration can't be forced. It comes at unexpected moments when we're not seeking it, in the shower, or while we're walking or meditating. I recently watched a documentary on the old 1980s singing group, the Bee Gees, which had interviews with many musicians, and they all described how songs came through them as if out of the air. The melody and the lyrics arrive spontaneously if they open themselves to the source. So inspiration can't be manipulated, but it can be denied. Have you had a moment of inspiration and sabotaged it with dismissal? What did you say to yourself? It doesn't matter. Nobody will care. What were the feelings that went with that and the sensations that went with that? And who is the shadow character that shut down your inspiration? Step 4 is production. The biggest risk at this stage is the inability to complete a project or a product. We may prepare and incubate and have an insight and be unable to complete. We see this with kids writing papers and people writing books. We see this with all kinds of creativity. It could be the procrastinator or the perfectionist or another character that fears completion. I had a client who couldn't complete a huge project because the anticipation of no longer engaging in it felt so empty, like his life would be over. So as you approach step 4, do you recognize these inner voices? I'll do it later. I'd rather do something else now. I should finish it, but I can't. I can't get it good enough. I know it won't meet their standards. What will life be like afterwards? What will be my purpose? And you may feel physically paralyzed, your muscles tight, your throat choked. And emotionally, you may feel depressed or anxious or afraid. And you may fear failure or humiliation at the completion of the project. These may not be conscious, but they're the shadow figures, the guardians at the gate. So the procrastinator can cause delay and distraction, and the perfectionist can demand a standard that sabotages your completion. What is your inner dialogue for production? What are the feelings and sensations that go with those thoughts? Give them a name and an image. Who's your shadow character? So if we look at these shadow characters overall, throughout the creative journey, we see they generally include denial. We refuse the call. We deny the inner prompting. We stop the process before it can begin. Dismissal. We dismiss the need to prepare. We dismiss the means of incubation. We dismiss the insight, the importance of the eureka moment. And devaluing. We devalue creativity and the steps. We can't move forward with preparation. We devalue the link to the unconscious in incubation. We devalue the finding of the eureka moment. And in the end, we devalue the product, not beautiful enough or breakthrough enough. And the result is the process stops at any of the steps, because if the shadow wins, it stops us from stepping into the unknown and exploring the creative unconscious. So with shadow work, we practice identifying the 3 cues, thoughts, feelings, and sensations, and personifying them into a shadow figure to make the unconscious conscious. And we allow them to move aside so the portal can open to the creative unconscious. So let's review. The nature of the shadow is to hide, to remain outside of awareness. And it acts out in all these ways I've described to sabotage our creativity or our relationships, our communication, addiction, our moods. It sabotages us in so many ways. So we need to learn to catch a glimpse of it when it appears. And then we can romance it or coax it out into awareness. And then it will recede again behind the curtain. And with patience, we invite it out into the light. And this process of slowly bringing the shadow into awareness, forgetting and remembering it again, is the nature of shadow work. So in the context of creativity, you can begin to notice where the shadow is sabotaging your process. Notice your inner dialogue, thoughts, feelings, and sensations, and imagine them as an inner figure. And as you personify it, who is it? Give it an image and a name. And as you meet the procrastinator, the critic, the perfectionist, the avoider, the distractor, what are the consequences if you obey it? And instead, can you romance it? Complete your project and feel good about not following the shadow character. So just as we all carry within us the inner child, the wise old man, the critic, the perfectionist, we also carry the archetype of the muse, a timeless blueprint for the creative voice of the soul. In Greek mythology, the 9 muses are deities of inspiration who connect us to the creative unconscious. And each had her own domain. The muses of poetry, music, comedy, tragedy, history, dance. The muse may appear within us in other images, depending on our culture, gender, ethnicity, age. It may be young and innocent or ancient and wise. dark as night or light as the moon, our own gender or another, arising in our own culture or from a foreign land. In each image, the muse connects us to the creative unconscious, the source of imagination. And to live a creative life, we want to learn to attune to her or him to guide us in our approach to the threshold. Classic literature typically opens with an invocation to the muse, but today we don't consciously call upon this creative image. In New Orleans, there are streets named for the muses, but we see that it's embedded in our contemporary music, in our contemporary language with words like music, museum, musing on something, amuse ourselves. So I'm going to leave you with an imaginal exercise to take you to meet the muse. Close your eyes for a moment and follow along with my instruction. First, breathe easily into your belly. Drop down from your chest into your belly and allow your mind and body to relax. Let go of any ego agenda or desired outcome and approach the threshold to the creative unconscious with respect and curiosity, welcoming the muse and allowing it to take any form. When you're ready, visualize in your mind's eye walking up a set of stairs leading to the door of your muse. When you knock on the door, your muse, the embodiment of boundless creativity, greets you with a warm embrace. As you gaze into his eyes or her eyes, you feel unconditionally loved and reassured about your creative life. As a pilgrim confronting the source of creativity, ask the muse for guidance about a creative issue that puzzles you. It might be a practical concern, to an emotional block, to a motivational issue, to a question of meaning. After posing your question, remain in a state of receptivity, allowing an answer to arise as a sign, a symbol, an inner sense of knowing. When you receive an answer, rest in silence for a while. And then as you look again into the eyes of your muse, you'll hear these parting words. Journey on with confidence, with blessings, as you proceed on your path of creativity. Visit me again when you need further guidance. With deep gratitude, take leave of your muse and walk down the stairs to depart. Take a few breaths, sitting quietly, and then slowly open your eyes and return to the waking state. Record your impressions. Who appeared to you? Why this particular form of the muse? And what did he or she say that was important to you? The muse dwells within us, waiting to guide us to the creative unconscious. For years, we've been unknowingly obeying the voices of shadow characters, listening to the noise rather than the signal. We've been allowing denial and distraction to stop us. We've been taking in the critic following the compulsions and acting out the self-sabotage. It's time now to attune to the voice of the muse. Make a conscious relationship with it and allow it to guide us across the threshold to the source of imagination. Its voice comes from the deep center of ourselves. It's never critical or shaming, like a shadow character. Its voice is a guiding whisper, like a wise elder who sees us and knows who we are. The muse is an inner GPS to the creative unconscious. It can't emerge if we're faking it, pretending to paint or write. It can't emerge if the ego doesn't get out of the way, or if a shadow character stands guard at the gate of the unconscious. The muse is waiting here now for you to greet it and cross the threshold into the imaginal realm. So for many of us, the gold lies waiting in the shadow. It's not only our forbidden traits and behaviors that are repressed, it's many of our gifts and dreams and talents. What is there for you to do now that only you can do? So my first two books on shadow work have both been reissued with new writing. Meeting the Shadow is an anthology of 65 essays by thought leaders on the shadow in every arena of life. How the shadow forms in families, how it shows up in our intimate relationships, dating and marriage, how it shows up in the workplace, in politics, and in creativity. Romancing the Shadow is an authored book that focuses on relationships and how the shadow and unconscious patterns sabotage our intimacy, our desires for connection, and leave us feeling lonely or unseen or neglected or abandoned. So if your focus is relationships, then I recommend Romancing the Shadow. If you desire a big picture overview of the shadow, then start with Meeting the Shadow. If you are in midlife and beyond, and you'd like to read about shadow work and aging, then I recommend The Inner Work of Age, Shifting from Role to Soul. This book is about aging as a spiritual practice, and it's filled with shadow characters like the inner ageist and the doer, but it's also filled with spiritual practices in every chapter to allow us to shift our identity from our roles, our doing, to our souls, who we really are, our spiritual nature. Meeting the Shadow on the Spiritual Path extends shadow work into religion and spirituality. So if you are a survivor of religious abuse or spiritual disillusionment, if you have a longing for union with the divine as a spiritual seeker, if you look for awakening and yet have met the shadow of a teacher or a community, and this resonates with you, then I recommend Meeting the Shadow on the Spiritual Path. Thank you. I'm going to close now, and I hope that this was a meaningful hour for you that we spent together, and that your creative projects thrive and get out to the world where they are so needed. Thank you.